The Amazon Coven. The Amazon Coven consists of 3 sisters, Kachiri, Zafrina, and Senna, all natives of the Pantanal wetlands. The sisters never interact with humans except when hunting. They do not associate with them or make any pretense of behaving in a human way. They are feral in appearance and rarely leave the unpopulated wetlands except to hunt. Few vampires, including the Volturi, have ever heard of this coven. Kachiri. Date of birth, unknown. Date of transformation, unknown. Source of transformation, unknown. Place of origin, South America. Hair color, black. Eye color, red or black. Height, 6'4". Physical description. Kachiri is very tall with thick black hair. Her features and limbs all appear unnaturally long. Special abilities. She does not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships. She is part of a coven with her sisters, Senna and Zafrina. Personal history. Kachiri belonged to an ancient native tribe located on the fringe of the Pantanal. After she was changed, she went back for her 2 closest friends. They've been together ever since, rarely leaving the wetlands, hunting in the habitations along the fringes. Their self-sufficient way of life has kept them a secret from most other vampires. Carlyle and his family discovered them in the 1940s while on a hunting trip. The Cullens' interest in large animal game brought them to an area other vampires dismissed for its lack of human prey. The Amazons were quite taken with Carlyle's gentle, friendly manner. Senna. Date of birth, unknown. Date of transformation, unknown. Source of transformation, Kachiri. Place of origin, South America. Hair color, black. Eye color, red or black. Height, 5'11". Physical description. Senna is the shortest of the Amazons, but still very tall. She has the same long limbs and facial features as Kachiri and Zafrina. She wears her black hair in a braid, and her clothing is homemade from animal skins. Special abilities. She does not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships. She is part of a coven with her sisters Kachiri and Zafrina. Zafrina. Date of birth, unknown. Date of transformation, unknown. Source of transformation, Kachiri. Place of origin, South America. Hair color, black. Eye color, red or black. Height, 6'1". Physical description. Zafrina shares the same long limbs, fingers, and facial features as Senna and Kachiri. Like Senna, Zafrina wears her long hair in a braid, and her clothing is made out of animal hide. Special abilities. Zafrina has a strong, illusory talent. She can make her target see any illusion she wants, or see nothing at all. Her range includes anyone in her eyesight. Family or coven relationships. She is part of a coven with her sisters, Kachiri and Senna. The Denali Coven. The Denali Coven was originally founded by Sasha, who was responsible for transforming Tanya, Kate, and Irina into vampires. They considered Sasha their mother and one another's sisters. After Sasha was executed by the Volturi for creating an immortal child, Vasily, Tanya assumed leadership of the coven. The sisters often amused themselves by romancing local human men. Such trysts usually ended in a meal. Their lovers never survived long. After a few centuries, the sisters began to regret their actions. They felt real affection for some of these men, and losing them was depressing. They tried to spare the men they associated with while hunting, but this didn't work. The human blood was too hard to resist in such close proximity, and eventually they would slip up. The longer one of them spent with a man, the more devastating it was when the man died. Finally, Tanya devised a plan to give up human blood altogether. She had a similar experience in the woods as Carlyle did with his first vampire meal. She realized that unappetizing animal blood could quench her thirst. Her sisters decided to follow her example, and after many years of practice, they developed self-control to rival Carlyle's. Around the time that Tanya and her sisters became comfortably settled into their new vegetarian lifestyle, they met Carmen and Eleazar. The newcomers were very taken with the Denali coven's compassionate choice. Tanya invited them to stay and try out the vegetarian life. Both parties enjoyed one another's company so much that they made the situation permanent. The coven was devastated by Irina's execution, again at the hands of the Volturi. At this difficult time, they were joined by the nomad Garrett, who had formed an attachment with Kate. Carmen, date of birth 1700s, date of transformation 1700s, source of transformation unknown, place of origin Spain, hair color dark brown, eye color gold or black, height 5'5". Physical description: Carmen has a slight olive tone to her pale skin. Her hair is long and dark. Although she speaks flawless English, Spanish is her native language. Special abilities: she does not possess any quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships: she is part of a coven with Garrett, Katrina, and Tanya, and formerly Irina. Eleazar is her mate. Personal history: when Carmen fell in love with Eleazar, he was a member of the Volturi. Carmen had no talent to interest the Volturi, so she was not invited to join. For a while, Eleazar worked for the Volturi while living with Carmen, but he felt the strain between his two worlds. Carmen was troubled by the violence of Eleazar's everyday life. Eventually, he asked for and was granted permission to leave. Carmen and Eleazar spent several years traveling together and living as traditional vampires, but they sought a more peaceful existence and were pleased to meet the Denali sisters, who lived a vegetarian lifestyle. They adopted the sisters' philosophy and were welcomed into the coven. Eleazar, date of birth 1700s, date of transformation 1700s, source of transformation unknown, place of origin Spain, hair color dark brown, eye color gold or black, height 5'11". Physical description: Eleazar's pale skin has a light olive cast. His hair is dark. Spanish is his first language. Special abilities: he has the ability to sense the type and strength of gifted vampires' talents. Family and coven relationships: he is part of a coven with Garrett, Katrina, and Tanya, and formerly Irina. Carmen is his mate. Personal history: Eleazar was once a member of the Volturi Guard. A gentle person by nature, he wasn't entirely happy with their methods, but he felt he was serving the greater good by working with those who would uphold the laws he respected. After Eleazar fell in love with Carmen, he asked Aro's permission to leave the Volturi, knowing that Carmen was not happy with his involvement. Aro didn't like the idea, but nonetheless gave his blessing. He felt there was a good chance that Eleazar would come back to the Volturi if needed, and he did not want to destroy a talent that he had no backup for. The Volturi were not actively recruiting as they had before the acquisition of the twins, but the future was never certain, and Aro might need Eleazar again. Following his departure from the Volturi Guard, Eleazar, together with Carmen, sought a more compassionate lifestyle. They were elated upon discovering the Denali sisters and readily adopted the vegetarian philosophy. Garrett, date of birth mid-1700s, date of transformation around 1780, source of transformation unknown, place of origin New England, hair color sandy blonde, eye color red or black, height 6'2". Physical description: Garrett is tall and has a lanky build. He wears his long sandy-colored hair tied back with a leather thong. Special abilities: he does not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships: he has recently joined the Denali coven with Carmen, Eleazar, Katrina, and Tanya. Kate is his mate. Personal history: Garrett was transformed during the American Revolutionary War. A hot-headed patriot who willingly fought for the colony's right to self-govern, he was a true believer in the American dream. His transformation occurred by accident in the aftermath of a battle. Local vampires took advantage of the war's massive death toll to feast frequently. Garrett was with an isolated group of 10 soldiers when a vampire attacked them, knocking Garrett unconscious at the beginning of the attack. The vampire drained the other 9 soldiers. By the time he came to Garrett, he was so sated that he didn't drink much of Garrett's blood. Given the blow to Garrett's head, the vampire didn't expect the soldier to survive. Creating another vampire was not his intent. After the transformation was complete, Garrett's quest to understand what had happened to him turned into a permanent characteristic. He is always curious and willing to investigate a mystery. Irina. Date of birth, 1000s. Date of transformation, 1000s. Source of transformation, Sasha. Place of origin, Slovakia. Hair color, pale blonde. Eye color, gold or black. Height, 5'2". Physical description. Irina had straight, chin-length, pale blonde hair. Special abilities. She did not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships. She considered Kate and Tanya her sisters, even though they were not biologically related. All 3 were transformed by Sasha. Irina considered Sasha her mother. Carmen and Eleazar were also a part of her coven. Irina was building a relationship with Laurent before his death. Personal history. Irina was the 3rd vampire added to Sasha's coven, after Tanya and Kate. As a human, Irina was a pretty peasant girl living in a small farm community. She physically resembled Tanya and Kate quite a bit, and Sasha liked the idea of adding a new sister for her other girls. Sasha considered the girls, including Irina after she was changed, to be her daughters, and they in turn loved her as a mother. They were a close-knit coven, so it came as a great surprise to Irina when she discovered that her mother had created an immortal child despite the Volturi law prohibiting them. Irina and her sisters were devastated when the Volturi executed their mother and the child, though they did not fault the Volturi for their decision. Sasha knew the law as well as Irina did, and none of the sisters could understand what she'd done. They did, however, understand her decision to keep them in the dark. The sisters' total innocence of Sasha's act was the only reason the Volturi spared them. All of the Denali sisters enjoyed the attention of men, both human and immortal, though flirtatious by nature. None of them ever settled with one mate. As there were always more human men than vampire men, their relationships most often involved humans. In the beginning, these relationships with humans were short-lived and usually ended in a meal for one of the sisters. Their behavior earned them a place in human legend as the succubus. The myth varies from source to source, but at its essence is a tale of a beautiful demon who first seduces her prey and then drains him of life. After a while, Irina and her sisters began to feel remorse. They were genuinely fond of many of the men they formed brief relationships with, and regretted their deaths, though those deaths seemed inevitable. They tried to pursue such relationships without killing the man involved, but eventually they would make a mistake, and he would die. The regret and guilt became too difficult to bear. For a long while, the sisters avoided human men completely, except as meals, but found this lonely. Tanya began to wonder if she could train herself to resist human blood altogether, and thereby make it possible to have human friends without killing them. While testing her ability to go without drinking any blood, Tanya had a similar experience to Carlisle's. Animal blood suddenly began to smell better than nothing at all. Tanya experimented with living on animal blood, and came to the conclusion that abstaining did make it easier to be around humans. Irina and Kate were excited by this breakthrough, and joined their sister in her experiment. After a few decades, all 3 sisters grew adept at this new diet, and at enjoying intimacy with humans without injury. Over a century later, a nomad couple named Eleazar and Carmen crossed paths with Irina and her sisters. Both unusual among vampires due to their compassionate natures, Eleazar and Carmen were immediately intrigued by the sisters' choice to forego murder. They stayed with the sisters to learn their way of life, and grew closer and closer. Soon they asked to join Irina and her sisters permanently. The sisters were pleased to enlarge their family. By the time the Denali clan encountered Carlisle, they were all as good at vampire vegetarianism as he was. They quickly bonded with the Cullens over their shared lifestyle, and considered one another extended family from that time forward. When Laurent came looking for the Denali sisters on Carlisle's instruction, Irina was intrigued by his interest in her family's way of life. She began to have romantic feelings for him, and he seemed to return them. Before their relationship could progress beyond this early stage, Laurent was killed by the Quileute wolves. Irina never really forgave the Cullens for defending the wolves' actions until she realized she was guilty of a much greater offense against them. Before she was killed, Irina had time to recognize how wrong she'd been to betray the Cullens to the Volturi without first asking them for their story. Katrina. Preferred name, Kate. Date of birth, 1000s. Date of transformation, 1000s. Source of transformation, Sasha. Place of origin, Slovakia. Eye color, gold or black. Hair color, pale blonde. Height, 5'6". Physical description. Kate is tall and graceful with long, straight hair the color of corn silk. Special abilities. She has the power to cause a painful electric shock-like jolt in anyone she touches. Family and coven relationships. She considers Irina and Tanya her sisters, even though they are not biologically related. All three were transformed by Sasha. Kate considered Sasha her mother. Carmen and Eleazar later joined the coven. In addition, Kate has become romantically interested in the nomad Garrett. He recently settled with the Denalis. Personal history. As a human, Kate was an attendant, basically a bodyguard, to a highborn female in a warlike tribe of Proto-Slavic people. She was well trained in the martial arts of her people. When Sasha and Tanya attacked a small caravan transporting Kate's charge, everyone but Kate was slaughtered. Sasha was impressed by Kate's courage and determination to save her mistress. Kate also remembered Tanya physically. On a whim, Sasha decided to create a sister for Tanya. Kate's strongly developed sense of loyalty resulted in her becoming quickly bonded to her new family. Within a decade, Kate's ability to defend her mother and sister with more than normal physical means began to develop. She had the ability to create a sensation like an electric shock by touching someone else, vampire or human, with the palm of her hand. Although the shock was strongest in her hands, gradually she learned to control the intensity and to project it from any part of her body, though she always needed direct skin-to-skin contact. Kate had a deep sense of respect for authority, stemming from her early training with a ruling family. This respect transferred to the Volturi when she joined the vampire world, and Sasha explained its laws to her. She was horrified when it was revealed that Sasha had broken those laws so egregiously in creating an immortal child. Despite her loyalty to her mother, Kate could not ignore the fact that the Volturi were in the right. When the Volturi spared her and her sisters' lives, Kate was grateful for their kindness. She never questioned their motives, and her respect for their authority did not waver. Always lonely after the destruction of their mother, Kate and her sisters explored different kinds of company. All three were flirtatious and enjoyed the attention of men, whether human or vampire. The human relationships invariably ended in death for the man, and over time the sisters began to feel remorse for killing these humans they'd felt a genuine fondness for. Kate was eager to try Tanya's solution, avoiding human blood altogether with animal blood as a substitute. After a few decades, all sisters grew adept at this new diet, and at enjoying intimacy with humans without causing injury. A few centuries later, a nomad couple named Eleazar and Carmen crossed paths with Kate and her sisters, and eventually joined the family permanently. By the time the Denali clan encountered Carlisle, they were all as good at vampire vegetarianism as he was. The Denali coven came to bond with the Cullens over their vegetarianism, and considered them extended family. When Kate met Garrett, she found something she'd never found in another male. She is currently attempting monogamy for the first time in her long life. Tanya. Date of birth, 1000s. Date of transformation, 1000s. Source of transformation, Sasha. Place of origin, Slovakia. Hair color, strawberry blonde. Eye color, gold or black. Height, 5'5". Physical description: Tanya is very beautiful, even for a vampire. Special abilities: she does not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships: she considers Kate and Irina her sisters, even though they are not biologically related. All three were transformed by Sasha. Tanya considered Sasha her mother. Carmen, Eleazar, and Garrett are also part of her coven. Personal history: Tanya was the first of Sasha's adopted daughters. She was Sasha's biological great-niece, and when Sasha decided she'd like some companionship in her vampire life, she chose Tanya to join her. Sasha enjoyed having the company of another female so much that she added 2 more daughters to her coven in the 1st century after changing Tanya. Tanya was the closest to Sasha, so she was even more shocked than the others when Sasha's crime was revealed. She could never understand why Sasha would act in such a way, but once the Volturi had tested Tanya and her sister's innocence, she did understand why her adopted mother would keep it a secret from her. Losing Sasha was a tremendous blow to Tanya and her sisters. Tanya always felt like there was an immense hole in her life. She tried to fill the emptiness with a long line of flirtations, which were enough to frequently distract her from her loss. Tanya was the first of the sisters to become sensitive to the deaths of her human companions, as she inevitably killed them for their blood. Over time, these smaller losses of short-term friends began to remind her too much of Sasha's death. When the pain of these losses became greater than her entertainment in the liaisons, she gave up human men for a time. Frustrated by the return of her nagging loneliness, Tanya tried to think of a way she could go back to her romantic pursuits without killing her human friends. After much thought, she decided it was the steady diet of human blood that made it so difficult for her to resist the blood of specific humans she wished to spare. Eventually, she discovered that substituting animal blood took care of her nutritional needs without weakening her ability to resist human blood. Her sisters enthusiastically mimicked her new behavior, and in a few centuries they had perfected their vegetarianism. When Tanya met Eleazar and Carmen, she was happy to explain her dietary choices. As the newcomers became closer and closer to Tanya and her sisters, Tanya naturally took her place as the leader of the whole family. She was delighted to meet Carlyle when the Cullens finally encountered them, seeing him as her peer in many ways. She was also intrigued by Edward, mostly because he showed no interest in her advances despite the fact that he had no partner. Tanya never gave up her light-hearted pursuit of Edward, which is one of the reasons the Cullens did not settle in Alaska with the Denalis. Other members of the Denali coven: Sasha, creator of Irina, Kate, and Tanya. Sasha was killed by the Volturi for creating an immortal child, Vasily. Vasily, the immortal child created by Sasha. Vasily was physically 3 years old when Sasha transformed him. He was killed by the Volturi along with Sasha when his existence was discovered. He didn't meet the other members of Sasha's coven until the day he died. The Egyptian Coven. The Egyptian Coven is one of the oldest covens, if not the very oldest, in existence. The remaining coven is just a fraction of the size of the original, but they still hunt on their traditional lands. Amun. Date of birth: before 2500 BC. Date of transformation: unknown. Source of transformation: unknown. Place of origin: Egypt. Hair color: black. Eye color: red or black. Height: 5'8". Physical description: Amun's pale skin has a slight olive cast, indicating the darkness of his skin before transformation. Special abilities: he does not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships: he is the leader of his coven, which includes 3 others: his mate Kebi, Benjamin, whom he created, and Benjamin's mate Tia. Personal history: members of the Egyptian coven, including Amun, existed as individuals for centuries before the Romanians' rise to power. After the Romanians began to grow as a coven and dominate their part of the world, several solo vampires and vampire couples joined forces to protect their dominance in the Nile River Valley. Unlike the Romans, they did not form a guard of subordinates or try to overthrow other vampire covens. Similar to the Romanians, they kept many human slaves and lived as gods. Also, none of them possessed psychic gifts. The Egyptians and the Romanians coexisted. They were cordial to one another, though not friendly. Had the Romanians continued the expansion of their empire, eventually they probably would have tried to overthrow the much smaller Egyptian clan. Before the Romanians had time to move that far south, however, the Volturi attacked. A century later, after the Volturi had soundly won the war against the Romanians, they continued their march against other covens that lived ostentatiously. Their next target was Egypt. Again, the Volturi began with an attempt at diplomacy. They sent ambassadors to the Egyptian gods explaining their cause and asking the Egyptians to comply. For the most part, the Egyptians were furious and refused to grant the Volturi any power over them. Only one Egyptian pair changed sides, Amun and Kebi. Amun knew that if the Volturi were able to overthrow the Romanians, the more peaceful Egyptian coven would be easy prey. He was right. The Egyptians were totally decimated in only 5 years. Amun had a very strong survival instinct, and he was willing to bow to the Volturi if it kept him alive. Kebi followed Amun's choice without question. However, Amun was always bitter at having to surrender his former lifestyle. He loved the worship, the towering desert monuments, and the excess. He knew he could not plot against the Volturi because Aro would find out, but he hoped that, over time, he could gain the strength to oppose them. He had learned from the Volturi methods, and he sought out talented humans and vampires. Unfortunately for him, Aro was well aware of Amun's true desires. Aro felt the need to let Amun survive in the first place as an example to other covens, so they could see the truth of the Volturi's offer. As long as they did as the Volturi commanded, they could live. Aro always kept a close eye on Amun's movements afterward, so Aro was able to identify individuals Amun was trying to integrate into his own coven, and, if they had a valuable talent, invite them into the Volturi guard first. Sometimes he was too late, and Amun found a good prospect first. Dimitri was one of Amun's acquisitions, but with Chelsea on his side, it was not hard for Aro to woo people away from Amun. In other cases, Aro would simply accuse a coven of a crime when he wanted one of their talented members. He'd kill the rest and save the special one, but Aro enjoys toying with Amun too much to end his life that way. Over the centuries, Amun gave up trying to create his own talented force. However, when he stumbled across Benjamin, who, as a human, was performing, quote, magic tricks in the streets of Cairo, he began to dream again. He became a total recluse, keeping Benjamin a deep secret by avoiding contact with any vampire or human who might possibly cross paths with the Volturi. He treated Benjamin as a son, and Benjamin viewed him as a father. The only big falling out they had in the early years of their coven was when Benjamin left briefly to create his own mate against Amun's wishes. Benjamin was quickly forgiven when he returned, with no harm done. Benjamin. Date of birth: between 1790 and 1800. Date of transformation: between 1805 and 1820 at age 15. Source of transformation: Amun. Place of origin: Egypt. Hair color: black. Eye color: red or black. Height: 5'7". Physical description: Benjamin appears to be a teenager, and his pale skin has the slight olive tone that is evidence of his much darker human skin. Special abilities: he can influence the elements: water, earth, fire, and air. He is able to physically manipulate the world around him with his will, similar to telekinetic powers. Family and coven relationships: he was created by Amun, the leader of his coven, which also includes Amun's mate Kebi and Benjamin's mate Tia. Personal history: as a human, Benjamin grew up in the slums of Cairo. As a young child, he lost his mother, and he had no knowledge of his father. He was raised by his mother's extended family, handed around from grandmother to aunt to cousin, whoever was able to feed him at the time. Eventually, he ended up in the hands of his mother's uncle, a street performer who took in unwanted young members of the family and taught them to dance and sing for money, sell trinkets, or pickpockets, whatever they were most adept at doing. Sometimes he also profited from selling the children if they were no good at earning him money. The uncle discovered Benjamin's strange ability to control fire and taught him to do tricks with his gift. Benjamin became the most profitable member of the uncle's family and therefore very dear to him. Among the children in the uncle's care was a girl named Tia, a distant relative of Benjamin's. Tia was an intelligent, serious child, and she and Benjamin grew very close. They watched out for and confided in each other. When Benjamin was 15 and Tia was 12, they decided that someday soon they would run away together. Benjamin's audience was growing. More and more people heard about the amazing boy who could control fire. One night, as he was performing for a large audience, Amun observed the show. After so many frustrating losses to Aro, Amun did not hesitate. He snatched the boy from the street that night, in the process of killing the uncle, whom Benjamin was walking home with. Amun kept Benjamin hidden in his undiscovered, buried temple for 5 years. He and Kebi took turns hunting and bringing food home to Benjamin. Benjamin was never allowed to leave, so there was no chance someone would see him and mention him to the Volturi. Amun was honest with Benjamin to an extent. He told Benjamin that the Volturi existed and would want to steal him for themselves. He explained that the Volturi would use their gifts to enslave Benjamin, to take away his free will. However, Amun did not tell Benjamin why he himself wanted the boy, as a talent that could be added to his own coven in the hope of one day defying the Volturi. Amun treated Benjamin as his son, and never let on that Benjamin's talent was what he was really after. Benjamin responded to Amun's apparent kindness. He respected Amun and loved him as a father. His response to Kebi was less strong, mostly because Kebi did not show much affection for the boy. Amun was the center of her world, and all that she really cared about. Amun spent a great deal of time developing Benjamin's talent. He was overjoyed that the promise he'd seen in the human boy was more than answered in the young vampire. Benjamin was not only able to control fire easily, he also developed the ability to manipulate other elements. Wind came to him first, after fire, then earth, and finally water. It was clear to Amun that Benjamin was an unprecedented find. No one else like him existed in the vampire world. Amun was cautiously hopeful that his luck had finally turned. After Benjamin had completely outgrown the newborn madness, he began to think more and more of Tia. Though his memories of her were dim, he remembered enough to worry about what would become of her without his protection or his uncle's. Amun tried to convince Benjamin that human problems no longer applied to him, without success. Amun kept him as busy as possible, developing his talents and educating him in the arts and sciences, but Benjamin still found ample time to privately agonize over Tia's fate. He asked permission to go look for her, but Amun was adamant. He told Benjamin it was far too dangerous to risk discovery, and that the Volturi would destroy Amun and Kebi to get to Benjamin. About 5 years after his transformation, Benjamin disobeyed. One night, when Amun was hunting, Benjamin briefly trapped Kebi with a small cave-in and then escaped. Though it was his first time above ground in 5 years, Benjamin remained totally focused. He was determined not to be responsible for putting Amun in any danger. He searched at night, questioning anyone connected to Tia, himself, or his uncle. He was careful to hunt inconspicuously, leaving no traces that might be reported to the Volturi. To avoid notice during the day, he hid underground in crevices he created himself. Eventually, he found clues to Tia's trail, which led him to the port city of Suez, where she had been sold for a modest dowry to a much older man. She'd been 15 at the time. She was now 17. Benjamin was conflicted. Tia was safe. She had a home and a husband. His plan to save her seemed unnecessary now. He watched her for 2 nights, wondering what the right course would be. Finally, he decided to ask Tia. He waited until an evening when her husband stayed late in the city, and then he called to her from the small garden. He was afraid to have her see him in the lamplight inside, afraid that she would be horrified by the changes in him. When Tia saw him through the window, she raced downstairs to meet him. Though she was momentarily shocked by his pale, hard skin, she was overjoyed to see him again, having thought for 5 years that he was dead. Benjamin told her the truth right away, and explained why he'd come to find her. He said he realized now that she did not need rescuing, and told her he would go away. Tia was awestruck by the revelation that her best friend was an actual vampire, and yet still so compassionate and so much the boy she remembered. She asked for more details. As they talked, they walked away from Tia's house, through the dark city streets, so that her husband would not discover Benjamin when he returned. Benjamin told her all the details about his vampire life, Amun, Kebi, and hiding from the Volturi. They talked all night. When dawn was close, Tia worried that Benjamin would die. Benjamin told her about the sun's real effect on vampires. He offered to take her home before he had to hide, but Tia didn't want to go home. She'd already made up her mind. Benjamin needed her. She wasn't going to leave him to face the dangers of the Volturi alone. Benjamin warned her of the pain, but she would not be dissuaded. Benjamin guessed that it would be wiser to convert Tia before taking her back to Amun. He created a deep fissure in the desert outside Suez and carried Tia inside. There he bit her, and then waited with her through the 3 days of her transformation. As soon as she was transformed, Benjamin took her hunting. When she was satiated, they went back to Amun's temple. Amun was at first enraged, but quickly calmed down as Benjamin explained. Clearly no harm had been done. Having Tia with him as a vampire would remove Benjamin's one tie to the human world, and Benjamin had proved that he could be relied upon in the outside world. Amun's coven began to live a little more normally, though always with the greatest secrecy possible. Benjamin was very happy in his coven, with Tia as his mate. He did not question Amun's motives. Kebi. Date of birth, before 2500 BC. Date of transformation, unknown. Source of transformation, Amun. Place of origin, Egypt. Hair color, black. Eye color, red or black. Height, 5'3". Physical description. Kebi has long, curly black hair and a faint olive cast to her pale skin, denoting the darkness of her human skin. Special abilities. She does not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships. She is Amun's mate. Benjamin and Tia are also part of their coven. Personal history. Kebi was chosen by Amun from his human slaves because of her beauty and total loyalty to her master. Even after her conversion, their relationship was never one of equals. When Amun decided to bow to the Volturi's demands, Kebi followed his lead without question. She would have done the same if he had decided to defy the Volturi and end both their lives. Kebi has little emotion for anyone besides Amun. Benjamin she tolerated because he made Amun happy, but she was somewhat jealous of the boy. When Benjamin brought Tia home, Kebi was pleased. She hoped Amun would be less entranced with the boy when it was clear he loved Tia more than Amun. Kebi's hopes about that rift were not entirely fulfilled, as Benjamin continued to love Amun as a father. But Amun's jealousy of Benjamin's affections, though well concealed, was enough to make Kebi content. Tia. Date of birth between 1790 and 1800, 3 years after Benjamin. Date of transformation, 5 years after Benjamin's transformation at age 17. Source of transformation, Benjamin. Place of origin, Egypt. Hair color, black. Eye color, red or black. Height, 5'4". Physical description. Tia has heavy, straight black hair and pale skin with a slight olive tone indicating the darkness of her skin before transformation. Special abilities. She does not possess a quantifiable supernatural ability. Family and coven relationships. She is Benjamin's mate. They are in a coven with Amun and Kebi. Personal history. Tia had a very large family. She was one of many children. Her overwhelmed and financially distraught mother began placing her children in the care of her second cousin, Benjamin's great uncle, when she could no longer feed them. Tia was given away when she was 5. She had a good singing voice and nimble fingers, so the uncle kept her with him. When she was about 7, Benjamin came to live with the uncle. Though Benjamin was 3 years her senior, he became her best friend and confidant. Tia was the first person to whom Benjamin revealed his gift with fire. It was Tia who suggested he show the uncle. She knew that the special ability would ensure that the uncle would hold on to Benjamin, thus keeping them together. As the years passed, their close friendship became more serious, and they planned to someday run away together. They held back small amounts of money instead of turning all their earnings over to their uncle, saving for that future. Tia was devastated when Benjamin disappeared. When the uncle's body was found, everyone assumed that Benjamin was dead too. Tia searched out her mother, whom she found in slightly better circumstances. Tia had all the money she and Benjamin had saved, and her mother was happy to let her stay with such a contribution. Tia continued performing and stealing to help her family. After a few years, Tia's mother was offered a dowry for the girl, which she accepted. Tia was married to a clerk for a shipping company and taking to Suez. Her circumstances were more comfortable than at home, and she was not unhappy. However, she did not love her husband. When she saw Benjamin in her garden, Tia didn't question for a second that she would be leaving with him. Though she was totally unprepared for his changed appearance or revelations, none of it made a difference. When she realized that she couldn't effectively stay with him as a human, she was willing to become a vampire. Tia never embraced Amun or Kebi as fully as Benjamin had. She could see that, like the uncle, Amun was interested in Benjamin because of what he could get out of him. But as long as Amun's goal was the same as hers, to keep Benjamin safe, she had no problem staying with this coven.